You're listening to the Overfunctioning Podcast, learning leadership concepts through life experiences.
Welcome to the Overfunctioning Podcast. My name is Alex.
I'm John.
And I'm Zach.
And we are super happy to have you back. Today we're going to be talking about sabotage and saboteurs, which is one of my favorite words. So.
Oh, ho, ho, ho. T-E-U-R.
It just sounds like real fancy. But I don't think we find people who are saboteurs real fancy, so I'm not, whatever. Anyways, so that's what we're going to be talking about. Actually, we had a listener slash viewer slash feeler in her heart. They had a question about sabotage, and that's why we're actually addressing it today. And her question was, if sabotage is inevitable, how do you deal with the saboteur or the person who is causing the sabotage? And so that's the real question we're looking for. And I forgot to mention it last time. And to get a hold of us, you can get to us through our email, theofpodcast@gmail.com, or on Facebook. Those are a couple ways, and I'll remind you that again at the end of this podcast.
And we love hearing from you guys, especially when it results in questions like this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Keep them coming.
Yeah, fantastic. So before we move on to sabotage, before we get there, I want to recap our last Zammer, or our Zach and Alex movie review. And Zach, what did we do? And go ahead and go with that.
Yeah, so I'm certain all of you observed our Zammer. Hashtag that, put it on Twitter. We're hoping to see 20, maybe 30 hashtags on the public Twitter. We're really hoping this blows up. But we reviewed Hacksaw Ridge, and it follows this guy whose last name is Doss, and he just joins the military because it's a conviction of his. And we talk a lot about character. We put in a lot of spoilers. We talked about Bowen's theory. One of the things I found most interesting was how conviction-driven this guy was. And Alex, you noted when you sort of storyboard a movie, there's always in the first 20 minutes a moment of sympathy. And typically, the movie is determined by how much character changes from the beginning to the end.
Yep.
But this was different in that the main character did not change at all.
No, the main character didn't change at all. The main character was actually the guide for the movie, and everybody else around him basically changed. So usually in a movie, the main character has another guide. So if we go to Star Wars, sorry, if this will be a spoiler for you if you haven't watched Star Wars before. But, we have Luke, and Obi-Wan I don't know. Anyways, was his guide for a while, and then you had Yoda was his guide, and so he had different guides helping him get to the next step of being a better Jedi. If you don't watch fantasy with lightsabers, I'm trying to think of another example of
Lord of the Rings, right? Non-fiction right there.
No, but no, you'll see this throughout movies. It's very classic, and I'm sure when we go to do more movie reviews, you will have a character. And if the character changes, which it should, otherwise the movie is awful, we could get there. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But usually there's a character who has a guide, and they're changing throughout the movie.
And so that storyboarding just sort of shows that there's typically a consistent framework to how movies work, and that makes it very conducive to thinking systems, to thinking how this whole system, psychology, this Bowen's theory plays through. And so we're actually addressing the military leadership throughout, and it's just a very interesting look from our perspective because, we talked about it for a half an hour and then probably another half an hour after. But it's just great to talk with Alex and to nerd out on Bowen's theory while also providing you guys with spoilers if you haven't seen a movie that's over a year old.
Yeah.
Well, I have to chime in here. Perhaps I would find movies more interesting. I think the last movie I saw in the theater may have been Apollo 13. So I could benefit from watching movies, apparently.
Especially when they're directed by Mel Gibson, who is known for his very over-the-top, acting, directing, and whatever else he's doing.
Most definitely. So before that, we actually had another podcast that the three of us put out, and it was about overfunctioning. So, John, what is overfunctioning?
Well, overfunctioning is born out of anxiety. It's one of the ways that anxiety is manifested, specifically chronic anxiety. I think it's the idea of the fear of what if, what might happen, and that can cause some, at times, to overfunction. It looks like worrying about a problem that belongs to someone else, trying to be responsible for an outcome as opposed to being responsible to another person and be responsible in terms of helping an initiative move forward. It's excessive worrying about what may happen if things don't get done. So because of that excessive worry, someone just takes on too much responsibility for whatever they may be, facing.
And the reciprocal of that, they take on too much. Somebody else is taking anything else, so they're underfunctioning. And then we also talked about how you could overfunction for yourself and then underfunction for your body. So you're doing a lot of good things at work and you overfunction because you're really competent, but then your body goes to crap because you're not working out.
Compartmentalizing your life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So that was overfunctioning.
So I think it's time for a fable.
It is, yes, it is time for a fable. And John, you are not allowed to speak of this fable because you talk too much, apparently.
Apparently I was overfunctioning with fables, so I will, however, I won't say what I'll do. I'll just let you talk.
Now I'm worried I'm going to get smacked or something. So I'll bring a fable to the...
Actually, I'd like to bring one up because
table.
I am uncomfortable with this underfunctioning role, so I'm sabotaging. I am sabotaging your efforts to increase your functioning.
You ruined my rhyme. I said you bring a fable to the table.
Okay, I will revert back to my underfunctioning role.
And I'm going...
Overfunctioning just ruins things.
Fable to the table. Okay, so...
If you are able.
One of my favorite systems to watch... we are currently residing in Northeast Ohio, and in case you did not realize, before the Cavaliers won a couple years ago here with their championship, we've been a black hole or a pit of losing games.
How about the Force? The Cleveland Force?
The Crunch? I don't know.
The Crunch?
Yeah, I think the Crunch.
They were pretty good in the 80s.
The Lumberjacks?
Yeah, they've registered a couple victories.
Anyways, before them... or Stipe Miocic, which I think he won a boxing. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. Are consistently, especially with our number one team here for most people is the Browns, they have consistently been losers. So it's really interesting for me to watch and listen on the radio to hear what people have to say. And there is an avalanche. So let's say the Browns, their first game, their quarterback was pretty good, and they did okay, and they lost by 3 points, I think, or 4 points, whatever.
Yep.
So people call in, and we're pretty upbeat, and of course they lose this next game, and it doesn't look as good, and so people call in, and it's just funny to watch the system because it is just boom, coach, we need to fire the coach, we need to fire the GM, all the team needs to be, they all suck, and we're gonna lose again, and. And so just from a system standpoint, it's that automatic function. We have been trained over the up-teen years that our team is not good. And so we've seen not good for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so we've seen not good again. And what's going to keep happening is we're still going to be awful. So my automatic function is to say, well, fire everybody because we need to start over, which is something that the Browns have done over and over again.
They have.
Geez, every year they have decided to go ahead and fire their coaches and the people and start over and over again, which is a pattern of an anxious system, not knowing what the heck they're doing,
right.
And then in a reactive way saying, well, we'll just restart, and we'll just, every single time restarting.
Yeah, and I think that snap judgment of... Either there's pain involved for the Browns fans. I certainly enjoy the Browns, but I'm not, invested in the Browns. But there are some people who are invested in the Browns, emotionally. And boy, when that pain happens, they just want it to go away and have hope restored. And so we're going to get rid of Romeo Cornell. We're going to bring in Rob Chadinsky. He does decent. We're going to fire him. We bring in, I don't even know,
Pettin.
Mike Pettin, and then Pat Shermer, and we could go on, but it's just
Within like a 3-year run.
Yeah.
That was there's like a 4-year boom, 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 boom. Sorry.
But the passionate Browns are demanding fix it now, and it's a cultural thing, and it takes time, but in a reactive society, we don't have time for that. It's like fix it now, and so that's the simplest thing to do.
Yeah, so the moral of that fable, I guess, would be it's easy to see in highly anxious systems this attitude of we need a quick fix solution.
Yep.
Oh, my good golly, yes.
And so I think maybe bringing in Mel Gibson to be GM.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's the answer.
That seems like a slam dunk for sure.
Yeah.
For another firing, I would be. So with that awkward transition, we're going to go ahead and one other thing I want to say about whether you're listening to the Browns, whatever team or whatever, I always wonder, like, if that team gets good, how are the people going to react, And even when the Cavs won, people didn't know, like, what a winner looked like, so they were just kind of real, oh, yeah, we're the best, and, like, rubbing it in people's faces. They don't know how to, like, react when they actually have good things around them. So it's just kind of funny. Or they'll still be stuck in that mindset of one little things happen and your team is one, like, we have the Indians this year. And if your team wins all these games and one little bad thing happens that, this is the worst and blah, blah, blah. So it's just all that reactive behavior, which is so scrumptious. Sabotage, gentlemen. That's what we're going to next. And it's not only a great song by the Beastie Boys, which I'm sure John has on his iPad. iPod,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Or you have a Discman?
No, I have a auto reverse cassette player with Dolby noise reduction.
Technologically advanced
Yes,
there.
it is. Yep.
I don't even know what an auto reverse is, but we're just going to steamroll right through that. As far as Sabotage goes, what is Sabotage? Where does that manifest? What happens there? How does Sabotage happen?
Sabotage seems like just it's that reactive behavior, but it's inherently detrimental to the system. It's done in such a way that it's meant to prevent, I guess if we asked what is success, but whatever the view of success is, or the flourishing or the growth of something, or even just maybe not in those terms, the continuation of someone's leadership, or I don't know how you want to define it, but just the automatic emotional response to stop something in typically a very negative way.
Yeah, I think it's the system's auto reverse.
Oh, I hate that you are correct right now.
Bringing it back to the auto reverse, you said, what is that auto reverse thing? That's what this is. So it is the cassette player coming back and kicking the system back to the way it was before. Uh-huh. So when an individual chooses to do something different, then the system will automatically react to that change and will sabotage. This is an extreme form of reactivity, but will sabotage initiatives. And there's a phrase that says, sabotage has 1,000 faces. So it comes up in lots of different ways.
Yeah, and it's a manifest of a lot of different types of things, different types of reactivity. And especially since we talked about overfunctioning last time, overfunctioning can also lead to a point in where people bring a lot of togetherness. And so the sabotage on that end can manifest out of that. And so let's say if somebody decides to step out of a system and they're like, no, you know what? I've changed as a person, and I believe in this now. This system will say, oh, heck no, you don't. I'm going to teach you how you don't, and I'm going to pull you right back into this thing. And so you mentioned your fable last time about a student who was underfunctioning, mom was overfunctioning, and when she decided to not overfunction anymore, the student, in his case, in a fit of sabotage, would say, well, I'll teach you. I'm going to underfunction even more now. And so to make you feel even more awkward and to pull you right back into overfunctioning, I'm going to decide to sabotage everything you're doing. You said it's my job, it's my role to now, work on my homework. I'm not going to. I didn't work on it before, and now I'm actually going to tell you I'm not working on it.
I'm actually going to do my assignment and then tear it up and throw it in the trash when I'm done. That is underfunctioning.
That's a weird mix of I functioned and then I decided to underfunction just to spite you in a face of sabotage.
The accent mark on that little screw you, like I don't want any change to happen.
Yeah.
But really though, you talked last week, John, and the mother, she was able to hold up that. She sent you an email or called you or something along those lines, and she said, hey, I decided to follow your advice. I'm not going to do this for my son anymore. And I told him that, and he came into you the next day and said, you've been talking to my mom. And several weeks after that, maybe a month or two, you noted that she had gone back to her behavior that typically underfunctioners will double down on their behavior so that they don't have to function. So that brings us back to the question of what do we do when we're being sabotaged, when we're inherently preventing any growth because we're so opposed to change.
So if you're in a system, so the question we're trying to answer, if you're in a system and you are being sabotaged against, or you're seeing that sabotage happen, what are you going to do? What are you supposed to do? How do you deal with the person who is causing the sabotage?
I had a conversation with someone recently who was talking about someone who is sabotaging an initiative in their organization. And they came to me and asked, how do I deal with so-and-so? And I said, well, what do you think? What are some ways that you think you might want to deal with this? And this person said, I'm not really sure, but I did talk to a friend who said, you just got to tiptoe around them and be careful what you say. And this person I was speaking with said, you know what? Damn it, I'm tired of tiptoeing around this person, and I want to take a stand. But we're tempted to just avoid making them angry or upset, because you talk about double downing on underfunctioning. If you attempt to change the system and directly address the saboteur, expect the saboteur to get their saber out and sharpen it, and now you got real problems on your hand.
And block you from Facebook.
My MySpace account has been blocked by lots of people in the last few weeks, I've noticed.
Yeah, and in addition, I'm going to block you, and I'm going to post that I blocked you.
But you post before so that you're certain they've seen it.
So to take on a saboteur is the gloves come off, and it's going to get more acute. But I think, in response to, I think this is where strong leadership is really important. Saboteurs, and I don't like that word. Can we come up with a different word besides a sabotager versus a sabotagee?
I don't even know.
Sabotager.
How about the Sabotage Mahal is where they live?
Oh, yeah. They all live in the same area, of course. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the saboteur who lives in the Sabotage Mahal, I think strong leadership is really important to be able to say, this is what is acceptable and this is what's not. One of the hallmarks of a undifferentiated person, and that's someone who is likely to sabotage, is invasiveness and not respecting boundaries. And a colleague has a really difficult time taking on a saboteur because they don't have the authority to do so, but a leader of a system does. And that's really what needs to take place. And when that person doesn't step up, the saboteur becomes even more emboldened, even more powerful, and the system just cannot advance with that type of situation.
And anxiety is so apparent within this whole sabotage metaphor. Obviously, reactivity happens, reactive sabotage happens as an emotional response to something, and I bet it's often subconscious, right? Mm-hmm. You don't know you're doing it, but you look at that, and we're talking about anxiety from a systems perspective, well, there's change happening, which is heightening the saboteurs. And it's heightening their anxiety, and so they don't want change. They want to revert to the homeostasis of the system. They want to go back to where it was before. And you look at the receiver of that sabotage, the sabotagee, right? Yes, we're coming up with some great words.
Yes.
Their heightened anxiety is the first thing that you said when you mentioned that the immediate reaction of someone who was observing that was, let's tiptoe around them, let's let them go. That's heightened chronic anxiety.
You're right.
There's no acute anxiety in there, and that's just going to persist.
Yep.
And not only will that persist with that individual, but that's going to be shouldered off to everyone in connection with them.
Yeah, and that you are correct. That is just going to be right below the surface, and everyone knows it's there. No one wants to bring it to the surface. And, honestly, to address a saboteur is, it's an unknown. It really is. And to walk and tiptoe around them means let's just kind of placate and keep things tolerable. Let's keep it tolerable. And who wants to work in an environment where we just tolerate other people? And, I think you have to... this is where I think strong leadership is really, really important.
And to tolerate the chronic anxiety.
Yes.
And that's what it's this chronic. We're just going to let it stay chronic. It's cool. And then, but the strong leader comes in and says, okay, I'm making this acute. This is going to hurt. It's going to hurt them.
Yeah.
But it's also going to hurt me because you're going to get, as soon as you acute it, that's when you get the sabotage right away. And so...
Yeah, and I think to expect it, that this isn't a personal, so from the leader standpoint, they can take it personally that the saboteur is now spreading rumors or, triangling others and trying to get allies on their side against the leader. I mean, that is all going to happen. It's not like it might happen. It will happen because a saboteur typically is unable to learn from their own mistakes and see they're part of the problem. They just are very unaware.
Yeah, and it's not about going back to, so let's say you decide to, okay, I'm making this acute and I'm approaching the saboteur. That word. It's not saying like, okay, I did it and now they're sabotaging me and I've got to go chase them down and make sure everything's okay. As soon as you start, there's something to be said about staying connected to that person, but not in a way in which you're giving away, like, okay, I'm trying to like smooth things over because, I decided to make a stand against them.
Right. And I think it's close enough to influence.
Yeah.
Okay, so we think of that phrase, I'm close enough to influence, but I'm distant enough for them to lead. So close enough to influence, but distant enough to lead.
So I pulled up some synonyms here of saboteur.
Oh,
and
thankfully.
I do not
We're going to start using these.
Any of these other ones. We got the undoer, the destroyer, the diversionist. I like that one. We have the waster, the uprooter.
Oh, my gosh.
We are destroying nature here. The sleeper, classic underfunctioner, right?
Yeah.
Ruiner, and the wrecker coming in and there.
Wow, those sound like really awesome things that I would love to be a part of. Never.
Wouldn't you love to be called any of those?
the wrecker?
Alex the Destroyer.
Yeah, that sounds, I feel like I've heard of that before somewhere.
Yes. Yes, Moyer the Destroyer.
Yeah,
that is my nickname.
That does sound...
It has to do with relationships, but I won't go into that right now.
Yeah, and before you went into that, I was going to say saboteur. It's like they're having a tour of sabotage, just like showing it around.
Right, through the Taj Mahal.
Yeah, exactly.
Driving your sabotage mobile.
Yes.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Oh my good.
So
the Sabotage mobile has a auto reverse cassette player with Dolby noise reduction in it.
It has to. Otherwise, I don't know.
Why would you drive it?
I have no idea. They wouldn't.
So let's jump back to this question though. Like we've tiptoed around it, but what do we do as the people who are being sabotaged?
Yeah. So let's wrap this up. I think that's a great question. So it's going to take strong leadership. It's going to the acute. You've already decided to make a stand on something, and so the person that caused the sabotage now is going to continue to do that, and holding firm and staying connected to that person and not bending your will based off of whatever's going on here, but holding that firm stance but still staying connected is a big part of what's going on here. And that's going to be super hard because you're going to probably, in a lot of cases, become very lonely, and you're going to be alone at the top standing behind this decision. But the longer you stand there, the easier it's going to be on the other end. Now, it could come to a point to where you're going to have to do something with such and such employee or somebody part of your group if they decide to continue to sabotage you. I imagine there's a point where you say, okay, I've had enough of this. But
that acute response to anxiety right there, at some point you have to do something.
yes, exactly.
But so we always talk about the book Resilient Leadership. That's how Alex and I were introduced to this concept of Bowen's theory. And you, John, were introduced to it, I assume, by your bro, Jim Moyer, the co-author of this book.
But not his brother. That is his uncle.
Uncle, mother.
Uncle's mother, brother.
Sabotuncle.
Hey, brother.
So,
Well, shout out for Arrested Development for those that are fans.
huge fans.
Yeah, Buster is awesome.
But the book talks about this, and it says sabotage is a predictable, natural, and rarely deliberate response to a change that upsets the equilibrium of the system. And so, we talk about how Bowen's theory doesn't often provide answers, but more questions to sort of zero in on a direction to head, right? And so some tips for a leader dealing with reactive sabotage is don't take it personally, right?
Yep.
We've talked about that. You got to stay firm. It's not you, it's the change, it's what's happening around in the system. Manage your own reactivity, lower the anxiety, hold fast to your position. Alex, you've been hitting that one hard.
Boom.
And then watch for process rather than content. Do you have any thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, that last point of watching process versus content. I was doing a book study this week on Resilient Leadership, Chapter 1, and it looks at emotional process. That, the person that's complaining about X initiative, it's more than that. It's actually the idea that the system is being disrupted. So emotional process is the changing dynamic that happens in a system when you introduce some type of organizational change. So that's the emotional process piece, and that's what that's referring to. It's not just about the particular initiative that the person's complaining about.
Yeah. Are we wrapping this up, gentlemen?
I
With
think
that
so.
final thought?
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to do one final thought with what you said about the idea that it's almost subconscious or something that this is, and not to take it personal, and not to say this person's an awful person because they're sabotaging. It's almost a subconscious reaction on their part to what they see as a threat, and they communicate in ways that don't seem rational. But the system is, in one sense, I almost want to say the system's talking for them, and you obviously have to address them and their behavior, but I think having some grace and understanding for that person might be helpful.
And I think we always bring it back to family of origin, but automatic functioning, that's what reactivity is in a negative way. It's automatically reacting to the emotional change. And so you can always look at yourself. So much of this is self-awareness. If you are the saboteur, or even if you're not, when you're standing firm, look at how you're automatically responding to these things. And often, at least in my own personal case, you're going to find that it's the way that you were raised to respond to conflict, and it's going to somehow take root from that.
Interesting.
Cool. Well, I think that's going to be wrapping us up here. And so to get a hold of us, once again, you can email us at theofpodcast@gmail.com. You can contact us also on Facebook. And
So we are the Overfunctioning Leadership Podcast on Facebook. Hit us up. You can also find us on iTunes, on Google Play Podcasts. We provide the links for all of these on our Facebook page. You can also find us through our hosting platform at Simplecast. We provide that link on Facebook as well. And if you are so visually inclined, we recommend you watch our pretty faces on the YouTubes. And finally, we'd like to give a shout out again, as always, to the man, the producer of our sick beats at the beginning and the end, Jesse Huffstetler. And 4,
Starfish?
the Starfish Limiter.
Of course. And with that, I believe that's it. I'm Alex the Sleeper.
I'm John the Underfunctioner.
And I am not Zach the Destroyer. Just Zach.